Comrades, friends, brothers, and sisters, welcome back to another episode of Working Class Revolt. I'm here, always honored to be with my co-host, David Fox. How are things today in Australia?
Oh, very good, very good. Just a reminder, it is Valentine's Day here in Australia. And obviously it's a very nice day out there too, but there's a lot happening at the moment. I'll give or at least give a couple of Labor updates in a minute, but otherwise, yeah, it's I think we're looking for quite an active year up ahead of us, the way things are going. Hello?
Orale, it looks like it froze.
Oh dear. Dust, if you can hear us, we froze, mate.
Let me see.
Oop, he's blacked out.
Yeah. Hmm.
All right, sorry about that, comrades. I had an internet connection issue. Hopefully you guys introduced the show well. So we're very honored today to have with us a very special guest co-host, Ignacio de la Sol. Ignacio de la Sol is a very strong, understanding, knowledgeable young revolutionary, very passionate, very courageous. How are you today?
I'm doing good, comrade. I'm very happy to be here, and I love watching your show with everyone else. So thank you for having me, and I appreciate the kind words.
Thank you for coming on.
Right on, brothers and sisters. Right on, comrades. We'll go right into the labor updates. As far as myself, man, I got this new. So I transitioned off the road, like I was doing flatbed over the road, and then I got this job delivering retail for the Christmas rush. Turns out the healthcare wasn't good, and now I found a company that's real local, got decent healthcare, but delivering to convenience stores. And I'm delivering a lot of liquids up and down ramps. This thing's kicking my ass. I'm getting a beat down. But I'm going to get used to it. It's kind of like weight training. I'll get in there. I'll get used to it. I'm having a lot of good family time with my son. These are the sacrifices we make, for our family. And this is what we face as the working class. As far as the community update, people are struggling. A lot of people especially restaurant workers, a lot of Rasa folks who are on the edges of the economy to begin with, especially here in North Carolina, are some of the hardest hit by this COVID crisis. And there's a lot we can do. There's a lot of opportunity for mutual aid work, and there's a lot of opportunity to radicalize folks in our community as conditions worsen. How is this struggle over there in Australia, Comrade Fox?
Well, first of all, as from midnight on Friday, 11:59 p.m. on Friday night, we went back. The whole state of Victoria went into a level 4 lockdown for 5 days. Obviously, there was a cluster in one of the hotel quarantines in Melbourne there, and basically what the state government did is decided to flick the switch for 5 days, or put the circuit breaker on, like a few other states have done over the previous few months, to make sure they can make sure they're on top of this before it spreads out even more. It's one inconvenience for some people, like hotel and restaurant workers and small businesses. Obviously, it's been Valentine's Day here today, and so some businesses were depending on that as well. The other thing as well, but what's coming out of this, we've still got the Australian Tennis Open still going on at the moment while the whole state is in a lockdown, and people are questioning it. Why are we having a game like this continuing? Why everyone has to be in the lockdown for 5 days? And we know the answer to that. Obviously, it's all about keeping profit going, and but it's one set of rules for the bourgeoisie, another set of rules for us. And that's what it's coming down to. It's not about arguing if we have to have a circuit breaker lockdown for 5 days. But the argument is, how come we're allowing a tournament or a tennis tournament to go ahead, or one set of rules for the rich to make money from, and then there's a lot of other set of rules for us. It should be a total lockdown. That means everybody's locked down. Even sporting events are off for the time being for 5 days, and I'm sure they can actually put that off for a week or two until things move ahead. The other one as well for Australia, for those of you for overseas, we have a payment system called JobKeeper, which came in about this time last year from the federal government. It's for those who are working in businesses that might be suffering a net loss in business. And it says so to alleviate any redundancy or other type of job losses, the federal government came up with JobKeeper. And over the course of time, it was supposed to originally end in September, but they continued it. But then they, with a reduced amount of income coming into a worker's pocket every week, and then now what's happened? They're looking to actually then stop it by the end of March. But but there's been calls to continue JobKeeper, because what we're hearing now is further job losses and also decreased spending in the economy, and it's going to be hurting a lot of working class people, common working folk, if that JobKeeper ends. The other one, as well, is an industrial dispute with Nestle at its Wagunya plant. It's in the northeast of Victoria, near the border of New South Wales. There, they make muesli bars, etc.
They cause plenty of trouble here as well. From stealing water to all kinds. Go ahead.
They've been making super profits all through this COVID-19, and all they can offer their maintenance workers anything between 1 or 1.5% to maybe 2% pay increase. The workers are continuing a form of industrial action of overtime bans and shift changes. We're looking to go back next week negotiations, but it just shows the multinational food companies, they've increased their profit margins tenfold during this whole COVID-19, but they're not going to offer their workforce any type of increase, or keep it a bare minimum increase at all. It's not just because they're just being mean and nasty. That's because they're never ever ending drive for further and further and further profit. And the way to do that, well, we've got to keep the workers' wages down. But as again, what we're going to see, we can further reerode workers' wages, their ability to purchase anything. The furthermore that commodities are overproduced and nothing's been able to be brought back. So, and we've got a crisis of overproduction. So next week we'll hopefully have a bit more information on that as well.
All right, so we'll continue right along. You down there in Florida, Ignacio? How are things going? Can you give us a brief labor update?
So I mean, things are just like everywhere else. Pretty tough down here right now. I work in the medical field, and right now what we've been struggling with is, so at the beginning of the pandemic, it was really popular for many offices to move to telemedicine. And with telemedicine, the patient doesn't need to actually come into the office. So it was nice. It limited risk. You still had to come to work and everything, but we were able to have some degree of protection. And slowly but surely, we've been transitioning back into in-office visits, which really, for no reason other than the fact that it's a for-profit industry and the doctors need to get their, procedures and medications approved by insurance companies. And through telemedicine, there's an increase in denials for procedures and such like that. So what ends up happening is the doctors, despite the risks and despite the fact that cases are still rising, they're having patients come into the office and they say, you know, oh, it's all good because we do temp checks, but there's asymptomatic carriers who come in and out. So a lot of the workers were being exposed constantly every day to potential infections and everything like that. And right now it's stressful. It's very stressful. But even, you know, we have the janitorial staff that doesn't even have, you know, health benefits. They don't have access to PPE, which they don't even provide us. So without any PPE or anything, they're coming in here and just cleaning up the facility and potentially putting themselves at risk as well as their families. And the majority of the people in the janitorial staff over here where I'm working is, you know, the raza. And they're just, you know, struggling to make ends meet while at the same time having to risk their lives to come to work. And it's really difficult. I've been trying to talk with the management and say, you know, like, this is really not right and everything. But, you know, they don't listen. They don't care, and they won't. So my focus right now is on talking with my coworkers, and I'm trying to get them to work with me to bring these things up so that we can have that discussion amongst ourselves and bring it to management after the fact. Outside of that, really, like, the community that I'm living in right now, I just moved. It seems like it's a predominantly New African, La Raza community, and it seems like, you know, same as always. It's everyone's struggling. We're trying to make ends meet. And one of the things that came up recently is, and I was talking about this earlier with some camaradas, the banks got together and decided that they were going to, for those people like myself and many others who had negative balances on their account, the bank would fluff the account to balance it at zero. So when the second stimulus hit, you had access to your full stimulus. Now, this wasn't discussed with anyone. There was no consent, no agreement, but they went out and did this. And in this imaginary agreement that they made with themselves to manage other people, they stipulated that in 30 days after that stimulus check, they were going to return the account to negative balance. So however much you were negative and they had to fluff so that you could get that stimulus, they then withdrew it. And I was on the phone with them for a long time today, and they basically said, you know, there is no wiggle room. They are not going to forgive anything. The best they can do is stop the accrual of further overdraft fees. But essentially, Bank of America, Citibank, JP Morgan and Chase, Wells Fargo, all these banks got together. And after the Treasury Department came and gave them the green light saying, look, there's no regulation saying you can't take this money for past due debts, they got together and they said, this is what we're going to do. So effectively, they've taken from people who are in the most difficult position with negative account balances, they've taken from them everything. And they've put people at risk of eviction, can't afford food, all these different things. And that's something right now that we're trying to talk about and hopefully get some collective action going around. Because it's really sad and it's messed up. But, you know, other than that, emotionally, I'm doing pretty good. I have a lot of great comrades who I'm talking with. I'm doing a lot of study groups, and it's good to really stay in touch with people and remain active.
Right on. That is downright disgusting. How many billions of dollars do they make off of people that don't have any money to begin with? It's bad enough they want, these credit card companies want to charge us 20% interest, 24% interest, with high fees. Not only that, they have to take money from people who ain't got no money. And that's absolutely disgusting. I'm glad you brought that up, brother. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks going through that same issue, and it's glad to have people talking about it. So we'll get right on to the news section. And what the big news item everyone's talking about right now is they got more of this impeachment hearing going on. And essentially, the way I look at it, if you read the language, listen to the language of this. And this is going 24/7 on NPR. NPR, liberal imperialist media, constant. These people at the riot, they attack their democracy. It's an attack on our democracy. It's attack on our institutions of freedom and justice and equality. Well, if you have been working class or you've been an oppressed nation, there ain't been any freedom, justice, or equality, and it's not our empire. It's not our system of governance. So what I'm saying is, even though Trump is disgusting and racist and doesn't follow the same democratic procedures, the sham of democratic procedures that they've been following, there's no reason for us to believe into the continual imperialist lies of the Democrats that somehow we have a stake in this fake sham of democracy when we don't, as the working class. And I think that is the media, and that is what is being shoved down the throats of our neighbors and coworkers 24/7, and we have to be able to speak out against it. We have to be able to counter that narrative. Ignacio, what are your thoughts on this issue?
Well, I agree with what you said. It's really difficult from a revolutionary perspective to try and approach the masses who are buying into this. And I mean, that's one of the tropes with the neoliberals, like the left wing of fascism, American fascism with 3 Ks, you know what I'm saying? Like, they constantly are trying to co-opt the movement, constantly trying to silence the oppressed nations, and it's a struggle because so many people, when Biden was elected, thought that, they could go back to brunch, anyone's talking about that. And this impeachment thing now, like, where they're trying to say, oh, we're trying to stop him from being able to run for president in the future, that never stopped fascism. The dude had his reactionaries storm the Capitol. You think he gives, I'm sorry, I'm not going to cuss.
Go ahead. It's welcome.
You think he gives a fuck about any laws that they're going to pass or this impeachment? Like, come on, so to me, it's just a waste of time and energy, and they're using it to distract us from the other stuff that Biden's doing. We still got kids in cages, families separated, and the Semitic colonies within the U.S., like, they're suffering and there's no relief for them. And we're just talking about the banks and how they're targeting the most, poor communities. So this whole impeachment thing is just another way for them to regain control of the narrative and increase their version of American fascism.
Right on, brother. Comrade Fox, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just interesting because we're actually dwelling on the subject of economic base and superstructure. And interesting when you do hear the liberal type media saying democracy. Well, democracy for whom? Which class of people? Because understand, we live in a capitalist system. It is not our system. It belongs to the capitalists. And out of the economic base, all the superstructures formed. They're the parliament, the law, courts, the police, military, media, education system, etc. And it's like a superficial democracy. We may be granted a few menial bourgeois rights. We might be able to speak our mind on something for a certain amount of time, or we might be able to achieve something for a certain time about. But what's given to us now is always given back. And I think that's a clear understanding for everybody, for working class people, understand. Now, when we're talking about democracy, and what's the difference between what we term is about democracy and what the capitalist class, when they talk about what democracy is, their form of democracy is we will still want to exploit to extract surplus value, aka profit. But that's what it comes down to, without sounding too technical about it. I think that's vitally important. When people are going, oh, but our democratic rights, our democracy is going. Wrong again. It's not our democracy. It's the capitalist democracy. And when we're talking about fascism and that, they're coming to realise that they're losing further and further grip, that its systems in crisis, feeling threatened. we're going to run now by brute terrorist dictatorship or brute terrorist force, military force, for example. I'll just make one example. Pinochet's Chile is one classic example of that. There's many others around the world, but that's one example I tend to use. And so it's always interesting. I'll use the liberal lie about democracy and what we're trying to do, and they're trying to attack Trump. Yeah, I mean, yes, Trump was obnoxious. Let's forget about that. But he was just the mouthpiece for a certain section of the ruling class, and that's what when it came down to it. And he misled a lot of people, and all that. And when the Capitol Hill riots was happening back in early January, I'm not condoning it, but however, when they're saying that was an attack on democracy, no, not our democracy. It was an attack on. It was the capitalist institution itself.
It's very, very complicated issues because you got they got people riled up to the elites. They control the media. They control the institutions. They had a plan to get Biden elected, and they put their troops out and they put out their propaganda, and they got masses of people to back Biden against Trump. And I think there was some just outrage against the outright vulgar racism of Trump. But I think the danger is now you have this thing that it was almost like it was a controlled opposition. They used the right wing. Trump was essentially their puppet from the same people that control the Democrats. And now we have everyone believing these disgusting imperialist narratives and having illusions in the Democrats. I saw a very good Malcolm X speech. If you YouTube "You're a Trump" by Malcolm X on YouTube, he talks about during the 1960s or 70s or whenever he was around that the Democrats controlled 2/3 of the government. They control maybe they control all three wings of the government. Maybe they controlled the Senate, the House, and the presidency, and they still got nothing done for black people. And if you look at it over and over again, that has happened again and again. If we look under Obama had controlled, the Senate and the Congress, and we didn't get $15 an hour minimum wage. We got bullshit health care. We didn't get a public option. We didn't get single payer. And it's happening again under Biden. Just recently, the stimulus passed the Senate, and it was down the middle between Democrats and Republicans. And the vice president, Kamala Harris, put it over the top. So that means it was they didn't even need Republican help to do it. So if the Democrats are on our side, we should have got $15 minimum wage instantly. We should have got socialized medicine. We should have got more stimulus. And we didn't get shit. We didn't get anything. And the Democrats and the Republicans didn't even stop them from doing anything. They did it without the Republicans. It was the Democrats holding it back. Didn't give us any, probably not going to get more stimulus checks. Minimum raise might be raised to 15 4 or 5 years from now. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. The only thing that's going to change things is to change the base. You can't fuck around with a superstructure and act like anything's going to happen unless you build working class power and build power in the oppressed nations from the people, power to the people. I get passionate about this stuff. Maybe we can go on a little bit more. Ignacio, you got any more to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, those are all great points. It's just, I think people tend to lump everyone together sometimes. Without recognizing that the bourgeoisie has multiple sections within it that have different interests, right? And you have some, like the Democrats who preserve some of the interests of one section of the bourgeoisie, and then you have the Republicans who preserve the interests of the other section, right? And there was a use for Trump for them. Both sections at some point, they fucked with Trump because he was such a character that pushed this outright racism and ignited all the reactionary sentiments among the settler class within the U.S. that bought into that stuff, that they were able to do all this stuff behind the scenes and get away with it because it's Trump this, Trump that, right? But his outright fascism compared to the Democrats, behind the scene fascisms, like stab you in the back with one hand and shake your hand with the other, it's all stemming from the same dominance, the bourgeoisie protecting their interests, and everything that Biden's done so far has not qualitatively changed anything. A lot of his own immigration policies are the same as Trump's, and he told all those people, I forgot what meeting it was, but he was saying nothing will fundamentally change. And nothing fundamentally has changed, because this isn't our president. Trump wasn't our president. The Chicano nation, the New African nation, all the, internal colonies within the US, this shit is just like mad disrespectful. And at the very same time, it's like the working class in general, like they're seeing more and more that these class interests are so antagonistic. We have to unite together to fight against these things. And how we unite, that's another discussion. But we have to get back to the point that, this is not our nation. This empire does not represent us. And until we assert ourselves and declare ourselves to be the creators of our own destiny, both sides of the fence are going to keep messing with us and screwing us up, putting us in cages. And, I really like to think that people are going to get on board with that a lot sooner than later. And recently, I feel like that has been happening, and we got to keep up that momentum. And we can't let Biden get away with any of this shit. Like, even the last thing I'll say, when he said he wasn't going to renew contracts with private prisons, it didn't even make a fundamental difference, because they got such little money from the federal government. It didn't matter anyways. They already had shifted their source of income. So, his progressive, policies aren't doing anything for the people, especially, like Black and brown communities and the working class in general.
And just one more thing too, what Trump was a useful tool by the capitalists to actually have the working class, the broad masses divided. He played an essential critical role. It was what's one of the big tactics that capitalists uses to keep it divided and rule, so they can rule easily over. And that's what they do. Basically, he was their useful idiot that kept everyone misled and divided, and with misinformation and suspicions of each other. I mean, it's a huge task for us now to get everyone back, and it's going to be a huge monumental effort now to get everyone back united again, because it's obviously from the aftermath of all that, the end result of his president since he's president. But the act is, the end of the day, you could just see how that was one method of how the capitalist class could and divide people on, be it on race lines, on whatever else, economic lines, a whole lot, instead of bringing the broad masses back together. And so they found Trump a very useful ally in this. And once he passed his use-by date, cast him out, and we'll have someone else in there. But obviously now we've got a massive task ahead now to actually bring everyone back to united against one common foe, our main common enemy.
Right on. I actually really liked Ignacio's analysis there, calling both Trump and the Democrats fascist. I think I differ in vocabulary. I said, they're imperialist, but I respect that analysis more than this analysis that the Democrats are not fascist, but Trump is. I think if you're going to call Trump fascist, you're going to call the Democrats fascist, because they do a lot of the same bullshit with better PR. And I really liked your analysis there. I've heard it again. To me, I guess I have a little more stringent definition of fascism, which is the actual tyrannical absolute rule of the state at the hands of the banking class, as in Chile or Nazi Germany. But I mean, we can't sit up here. We have a revolution to win. We got communities to build. We can't sit up here to fucking debating over semantics online fucking forever. We gotta do something about it. So I really appreciate your perspective and analysis, Ignacio.
Igualmente, camarada. And I was actually, one thing I'll add to that is there is this a podcast, Revolutionary Voices. Recently, that was done with one of my comrades, and an interview with Kevin Rashid Johnson, and they discussed an analysis on fascism, which you should check out too, because like that I thought was really good example of like discussing fascism. And I definitely agree. We need to address the semantics, but at the same time, we do need to focus on like the material work as well, so that we can get moving and, through practice, struggle through these differences and everything like that.
Right on. So we'll go right into the next news section. This one's about Iran. I put a lot of emphasis on Iran. To me, Iran is a very strong anti-imperialist country. They're a beacon of stability in the region. And a lot of these people they say are terrorists. Like just recently, they took the Yemen Houthis from the terrorist list. Biden was basically forced to do that because the war against the Saudis' war, funded by the U.S., backed by the U.S., against the Yemenis people, is one of the most disgusting war crimes that's happened in decades. We're talking mass starvation. We're talking genocide. And the Houthi rebels are some of the most courageous freedom fighters in the battlefield, in the struggle, dying and fighting for the very existence and life against imperialism. And it's true that Iran, was funding them, but that doesn't mean they're controlled by Iran. Iran was cool with the Irish freedom fighters, just like Gaddafi was cool with the Irish freedom part. And all these anti-imperialist countries, do solidarity work with each other. But what happened recently with Iran is the U.S. seized oil, stole resources, stole oil from Iran, and then sold off their oil, sold off their oil, and then they donated the proceeds to the so-called victims of terrorism. Now, turn that around for a second. Turn that around for a second. So we all know the U.S. imperialism is one of the most disgusting empires. Steals everything it has. Not the working class. We got to talk about the labor aristocracy and all that. But I'm talking about the crimes of U.S. imperialism are massive. So what say revolutionary anti-imperialist countries came together and said, oh, this was gotten by ill means, U.S. We're taking this and we're going to rebuild Africa and rebuild Latin America. What would be the response to the U.S.? They're going to go in there, invade and destroy and put that country on sanctions for life. This is the disgustingness and the absolute hegemony. The power of U.S. imperialism. They say the power of U.S. imperialism is falling, and it is, but it is still a very powerful force where they can outright steal resources, sell them off, and give the profits to who they want to. And it's an absolute insult to all oppressed people when they attack an anti-imperialist country. And Trump took the United States out of the nuclear negotiations. Basically the negotiation to let Iran be a global trading partner in exchange for, you can't have nuclear power. That right there was a fucked up deal to begin with. But even that, allowing them to be part of the global economy, was progress. And it was the Obama-Biden regime that signed that. And now that Biden's back into power, he is not taking away the Trump era sanctions. He is not going back. So there's very little hope for negotiations with Iran, and they're going to continue to be kept out of the global economy. And this is outright murder. This is outright acts of war. They are denying them medical supplies through these sanctions and killing people in the pandemic. Comrade Ignacio, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that it's important to note that sanctions kill, like you're saying. you know, and people, they hear the word sanctions and they don't really get a good idea of what that means or what it does, you know, because on TV they talk about sanctions all the time and they say, oh, it's our political weapon to avoid war. Well, sanctions are a form of war and they're taking lives every single day. And people need to realize this. I mean, what's going on in Venezuela, Ecuador, Cuba, the embargo, all these different things, they have caused so much distress and unnecessary burden on whole oppressed nationalities. I don't think there's a feasible way that we could ever correct that. But as people within the belly of the beast, we have to organize and maintain a firm anti-imperialist stance and say that we're not going to be down with it, you know, because we want to fight for our own liberation and freedom, but we have to be internationalists and we have to be revolutionary and we have to take into account what's happening in Iran. We have to take into account what's happening to all oppressed people, just like you were saying. And we can't say, no, we don't want these super profits. I don't care, you know, like what liberal crap they want to shove at us. We are opposed to it because it's at the cost of human beings. And, you know, one beautiful thing that I saw, like back when Trump was threatening to go to war with Iran, how many people came out to the streets to protest that? And I made a lot of really great comrades through just participating in that effort and trying to unite different organizations and their efforts so that we could collectivize this struggle and try to move towards being able to do something as a whole, you know, as a working class, as, you know, different oppressed nationalities coming together to represent their nations and at the same time be anti-imperialist in a united front. So all of that, you know, it kicked off a lot of stuff. And I think it woke a lot of people up to saying, hey, you know, like what's going on in Iran is relevant. Whether or not you agree with what Iran does or does not do, we have to recognize them as sisters and brothers and oppressed people who have every right to live and have self-determination without U.S. imperialism having anything to say with their, you know, their destiny. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, right on. And I think any type of struggle, like regardless, even if it's just a mere economic struggle, I think we've got to be still international in our outlook, that realise that our struggle is part of the broader struggle, and it's part of an international struggle against imperialism as well. And it takes a lot of education and practice, ordinary people, workers, etc., that to come to that realisation that our struggles are not isolated from each other. They're actually part of a big, broader thing. And I think that's got to be vitally important, because what I find is, I mean, there's no fault of anyone out there, really. I mean, until consciousness arises, people become more aware about that there's a lot of this individualism, and they individualise the struggles and that and keep them separate from each other. And I think it's vitally important where we could actually help do our bit to connect the dots, that our, be it it's an Indigenous struggle or an anti-imperialist struggle, or even a basic wages and conditions struggle, it's still a broader part of the class struggle. It's like how there was a comrade that Dusty interviewed from Taiwan, when he actually talked about struggle against imperialism as the highest form of class struggle. And I thought, well, actually, that made sense. It's just now how we go to develop from that to get it to that higher. For me, anyway, the question was how are we going to put it in practice to get it to that higher level of struggle?
Right on. Yeah, that was a good interview. He wrote an article called Anti-Imperialism is the Highest Stage of Struggle. And he basically continued the analysis that essentially that imperialism is going so strong and is the main enemy today, and we have to, you know, work different ways and structures to dealing with that. And I thought that was a really cool interview. If people want to go back and look at that interview, we'll go right into the next news item. Actually, David Fox, did you prepare any news items? Do you have any news items to add?
I think I'll probably from the start there. I was actually reading out for you. I was just mentioning about the struggle against Nestle. before everything frozen out at its Wagonia plant. And obviously, Australia, even though it is a wages and conditions struggle, the fact is it's a former class struggle. And I think it's what we've just been adding, what we've been talking on there, to be to do more bit to try and educate those workers of what they're actually struggling against, not just merely just a multinational, but they're struggling against the imperialist system itself, but maybe in a small localised form like that help them do that. So you've actually, thanks for helping me answer the part of that situation. I appreciate that. The other one, as I mentioned about the situation with COVID-19 and the lockdown, we're just going for a temporary lockdown. And I was just thinking something about it before, just how class divided we are here in Australia, and people may not realise it, but it's, for me, and like many other comrades, it's blatantly obvious. And an example, and like I said about having the Australian Open, which is the big tennis tournament here in Melbourne, they basically comes to say, well, there's one set of rules for the wealthy, for the capitalist class, and one set of rules for us. We all have to be in lockdown, not allowed to travel further than 5 kilometres from your home, only to get essential items and that, and, maybe for work purposes, but it's okay for them to go and have a tournament like that doing millions and millions and millions of dollars. So it just comes to blatantly show again, well, this is the system we live under. It's not our system. It's not our democracy. So that's important with that as well. I haven't got and obviously the third one was I mentioned on about JobKeeper before, but it just comes to show you too, it's like how they're pushing more people further and further into destitution and poverty, into the lower ranks of the working class. In the working majority, even people that were self-employed or own small businesses, how more and more each day are getting pushed down. And I did an interview yesterday with Comrade Freaky, and he's Indigenous in this country, First Nation, and he lives in Darwin. And he's interesting. This decade is going to be the decade that catches up with Australia. And we're going to see the actual literal destruction of our labour aristocracy here as well.
That you went through a lot there. It's interesting you're battling with Nestle, because Nestle, I think when California was having the drought, the government was just like giving them thousands of gallons of water for free to Nestle, while people weren't allowed to water their lawns, and they were just giving all this water to this multinational corporation. An interesting cultural note. There was recently a holiday that celebrated mostly amongst Mexican immigrants, Dia de los Reyes, and folks like to eat this big bread and have Mexican hot chocolate. And it's interesting that there is a chocolate brand they sell in the Mexican stores called Abuelita, and Abuelita is owned by Nestle. And right next to it, you see Ibarra, which is actually produced in Mexico. Interesting cultural note. Like when you're choosing and making these consumer choices, this isn't as effective as labor organizing. But we can look at those brands versus locally produced oppressed nation goods versus these disgusting international corporations. And any that caught your interest there, Ignacio?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, man, you get emotional because you have all these different companies that do these terrible things, and they just destroy, First Nations, their land, and we have to work to combat that. We have to be anti-imperialist, and as the one comrade said, we have to be anti-settler colonial as well. We have to address these things because, the class struggle in the economic base is, the principal contradiction, but this also vacillates, and we have to also incorporate all these other contradictions, like the settler colonial contradiction, the gender contradiction, all these different things in our struggle, which I think have brought about all these different hangups in us organizing effectively to combat these things while these corporations go out and destroy land, because a lot of times people don't know how to address these things because they're not a part of our communities, like the Chicano community, and they don't know how to engage with us, or the New African community or anything like that. And we have to really just listen to each other. We have to work with each other and be willing to accept people who have different perspectives, especially when it comes to unity, because, you know, a lot of people, they call for like unprincipled unity, and without, you know, a principled united front, we can't effectively combat any of these corporations. So it's just so sad to see what's going on, even in, you know, like Mexico, for example, you know, like what the Coca-Cola factory did to union organizers and everything. It's hard to really articulate how I feel about it right now on the spot, but it's sad. It's really sad. And I'm glad to hear what's going on over in Australia, especially, you know, them combating the labor aristocracy, because that's so necessary. They so often co-opt movements and sell out the working class struggle and the struggle of oppressed nations. And it's, you know, it's part of the new imperialist or neoliberal agenda. You know, that's how they keep us pacified.
Yep.
Do you have any response to that before we move to the next item, Comrade Fox?
No, well, it's interesting. You did a good point that raised out, and it's done. It's so far up to date. It's been done deliberately to once again to keep us divided. That one section of workers have always been better off, so they keep the working class divided. And now the task ahead of us here for a lot of comrades is now to bring that class unity back in, because it's important that the class is united, regardless if you're Indigenous or from a different ethnic background, or what happen to be a good paying union job, because reality is, at the end of the day, the common enemy, we've all got the same common enemy. And just to explain what I'm seeing at Nestle and what both of you've raised there is quite interesting. The amount of money that's the governments hand over to these big multinational corporations to subsidise them, give them free electricity, pretty much next to free water. But why us people, working class people, have to pay for everything? And we're up against those like same multinationals who like to rape our land as well, dig it all up. Dig it all up and sell it off, or poison it with pesticides, and store water away from the main river systems that make droughts a lot more severe, just so they can just in the name of profit, and they're all subsidised at the same time while the common people suffer. And what we're seeing even more so, when I mentioned about the destruction of labour aristocracy, it has been happening for a gradual period over a period of time, but now it's really much more intensifying anymore. So for those group of workers, they're no longer needed. They're surplus to a requirement now for the capitalist class now, for the imperialists. They're no longer needed. And what we're also seeing is basically imperialism destroying its own institutions, basically its own support structures now. It's got nowhere else to go, so in order much to destroy its own institutions. So the struggle here in Australia will intensify. It's got basically what happens when you have a reaction, you have an action against it. So you'll see it intensify even more. We haven't seen for many years here in Australia, and I think it's for that way, it's probably a good opportune time to actually get out there amongst the masses and start talking to them, educating them, and put in a very simplistic terms so they can understand that what we're fighting for is not against each other and just not within our own little interest groups, but actually it's a broader struggle against this, and we realise that's the main enemy. They're the ones that are causing all this problem in the first place, sending us off to wars, using us as cannon fodder, causing us extreme poverty, created this virus, everything. This is what's happened. And, so it's a monumental task ahead of us. But it's got one that's got to be done, obviously.
Right on, brother. Ignacio, I saw you mentioned one of the comments. I'm guessing you're able to see the comments. If there's a viewer's comment that you would like me to highlight, I can bring them on screen. Just let me know while you're talking, and I'll bring their comment on screen while you're talking. So we'll move right on to the next my last prepared news item. I usually when I prepare for my show, I read the Wall Street Journal. And this, that's Rupert Murdoch, the big evil empire that's trying to control Australia. But I like the Wall Street Journal because it is the capitalist press telling exactly what you want to think. And it's really easy to, as a working class person, just pick through that and know what's going on. When you start reading some of these liberal institutions, New York Times and all this, there's so much fluff there, you can't even figure out what the hell they're trying to say. But I like the Wall Street Journal because it's the enemy's press. You can read right through it. But for today's Saturday, and they didn't deliver Friday's paper for some reason. So I went on Democracy Now! And I haven't, messed with Democracy Now! That much. But since being more and more informed as an anti-imperialist and a revolutionary, I see how backwards Democracy Now! Is. Democracy Now!, just like Biden calls Myanmar Burma, the colonial name, and this really pissed me off. Recently, I was looking through the headlines of Democracy Now! And I read one that says, China bans the BBC. I'm like, China bans the BBC. And there was nothing else written next to that. Well, why did China ban BBC? Because the United Kingdom banned CGTV in the Chinese news in the United Kingdom first. And Democracy Now!, which is supposed to be one of the most progressive news agencies in the United States, did not mention that Chinese media was banned in the United Kingdom. So it just shows you how twisted even so-called progressive media is in this country. And along with that, Biden has put harsher sanctions on Myanmar. And this is killing more people to fight the Chinese people that are, just that, believe it or not, the Chinese government, I know a lot of people got issue with that. They have plans where they're going to lift this many people out of poverty. They're going to do this and that. It's a completely different structure. Now, I think I wanted to bring up China because Ignacio has more of an analysis of Marxist-Leninist Maoist, which is very critical of China. And I would like to say maybe Ignacio can respond to this. But yep. I have way more respect for the Maoist criticism of China than I do these liberals and anarchists who just retweet whatever the hell the CIA says. I mean, if you're gonna criticize China from a working class proletarian perspective, they're not doing enough for the working class. That's understandable. Just to repeat the lies of the liberals and the anarchists and go along with the imperialist media is absolutely disgusting. Since I mentioned you by name, Ignacio, maybe you want to respond a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's the liberal critique on China. It's really, we have to combat that as well, because we can't utilize bourgeois propaganda to criticize a nation of people who are doing something without the perspective of, the colonized people, a scientific analysis. And I think one of the fundamental things that I've read that's helped me develop a clear view is Rethinking Socialism and From Victory to Defeat by Pao Yu-ching. And in there, she goes through a lot of the different things during the period of development within China under the leadership of Mao, and then Deng, and so on and so forth, and very concretely points out how like different programs and their dual characteristics, as because even like the capitalist programs at that time, because there were capitalist programs, they had socialist characteristics, right? And even the socialist program had capitalist characteristics. And I think one of the big misunderstandings is that, once we seize power, things just cease to be, capitalist, and everything is just automatically transformed. But that's not the case, right? Because you still have all these old ideas, because under capitalism, the bourgeoisie crams these ideas down our throats. They try to, through colonization, through the media, through all these different things that's been discussed, get people in the working class and oppressed nationalities to buy into their superstructure and their program. So one of the big tasks that China got so far down the line in developing was combating these old ideas. And there are specifically, a couple different programs. I think one of them that always stands out to me is the Anshan Constitution, which is where Mao basically took the experience of these metal workers and summarized it to then implement throughout the industries in China to promote socialist development. And during the Cultural Revolution, when they had workers actually engaging in discussion about their own material conditions and how they wanted to run their factories. And there's this really great video online, Yukong Moves the Mountains, where you can see the metal factory workers discussing whether or not they felt a monetary incentive was good or not good for them. And you see the two different political lines coming here. You have the people who side with Deng and the people who side with Mao discussing back and forth, for those who produce more labor, how should they be compensated, right? And it's a really great, I'm not going to spoil it because you got to go watch it. It's really good. But it's a really good conversation. And that's the thing. When it comes to China, we have so many people criticize them without any understanding of them. And I read a lot of Xi. I've read a lot of pro-China stuff. And I definitely think there's room there to, talk about the successes of China, because there's so many lessons through their revolutionary movement that we can learn from, synthesize, and utilize. In particular, like SICA, social investigation class analysis. This is something we can take into our own communities and practice the mass line to understand what the people have to say, from the masses to the masses. We should be listening to them. And the Young Lords are a good example of this back in the 60s, when they actually went into the communities and talked to the people about what was pressing to them. And they went in there and they said, yo, what's good? What do you need? What can we do for you? And the Black Panthers did the same thing. They targeted the most oppressed communities to find out what it is that they really need, instead of just coming in there and saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this, this, and this, and then putting it onto the community, because that doesn't really activate the creative spirit and the love of the people to participate in something, because it's not something being born from them. And in China, this was done on a huge scale during the Cultural Revolution. And we need to study these things because it's pertinent to our struggle today. That's the historical materialist perspective. And not even just confining it there, but understanding, like the actual words, like how many people listen to what the Chinese people have to say today. That's something we also have to take into account, because they're the ones over there experiencing these things, participating, and we need to listen to them. And we need to combat the bourgeois criticisms of China, because they're not productive and it creates division, especially when we need to be promoting positivity within our own communities. And I think one thing that also really stands out to me is, listening to what the Communist Party of the Philippines has been talking about too, and their criticisms of China is another good way to understand from a perspective of oppressed people who are directly affected by their relationship with China. Listen to what they have to say too, right? So I'm all about principled criticism and practicing like no investigation, no right to speak, right? We need to do that. And I try my best to always give the benefit of the doubt to people and engage with them in a productive way, because the goal isn't to create all these antagonisms. It's to develop understanding. And when I'm wrong, I need to be called out. And when other people are wrong, they need to be called out too. And there's different ways to do that. We got to do it in a productive way. And then in some cases, there's no productive way. You just got to go for it. You just got to do it. But especially when it comes to China, because this is such an important question amongst the left in the US And I think being able to discern what is productive and non-productive in the conversation is important. And that incorporates combating that bourgeois perspective.
Yeah, and actually, that's an interesting one you put up of what's productive and non-productive, because we have a very similar situation here with the left in Australia as well in regards to China. And obviously, you had on one hand with people say, "Oh, China's not socialist," and you have others that says it is socialist, and those in the those that say it's not socialist, it's capitalist, even go so far calling it social imperialist. And I actually stipulated at a particular meeting of some group of comrades once, I said I wouldn't go that far, calling them that. That's to me a little bit extreme, but. And I felt I was right, but it was an interesting point you raised up there about how we actually should engage with the Chinese people and find out ourselves, investigate ourselves, and coming back, because what I find, I don't know over there what's like, but a lot of people are just from the outside looking in and saying, well, and they've got the textbook in front of it, and it says this does not meet, it doesn't tick the checklist, so therefore it must be that, and without actually going into it. And I said, well, so probably just out of curiosity, are you coming up with a lot of that yourself?
What do you mean, like what I was saying?
Yes, yeah, like what you're saying. A lot of people on the left I'm quite confused about what's going on. Some people say that's not, it's socialist. Some people say no, it's capitalist. And you got those who even call it social imperialist. And they, Adam, and you find you're coming across a lot of that yourself.
Yeah, I do come across a lot of that, and I find myself having to, in some cases, defend China from, the bourgeois perspective, and in some cases, criticize China. You have to do both. You have to, because here so much opinions get muddled up in subjectivity, and people don't have that critical analysis. And I'm still developing mine. I have by no means claim to have like the answers for that. That's a whole discussion in and of itself. But yeah, like I think that, and if you go on to like Foreign Language Press, you can download the free PDF for Rethinking Socialism by Pao Yu Ching. And it's a really great start. It's very short. I think it's less than like 100 pages. And she actually talks about the different periods of development in China and breaks it down systematically in a very comprehensible way, so that anyone can engage in this discussion and do so productively without, reading all these news sources like Comrade Dust was saying that are just completely bogus and they don't have any idea what they're talking about.
Yep.
Right on.
And it's also
go ahead.
It also it's a challenge for those of us on the left. Oh, well, I'll just use the left broadly. Just a loose term here. For those that we're trying to explain to the working class here about China, because there's a lot of anti-Chinese sentiment, also by the bourgeoisie. There's trade stouts with China, but even it flows into the working class. It's more about keeping us divided, because on that, they're saying, blaming, anything that's coming in that's imported from steel and all that's not up to good. It's always Chinese-made stuff. It's inferior, and then they say, China taking away our jobs and that. And I'm trying to explain, no, China didn't come marching in here and steal everything. Or even those who are saying, China owns one of the biggest cotton plantations in northwestern New South Wales and is storing all this water. But I said, well, what about all the other multinational corporations as well? I mean, yes, that should be criticised, but, and it's just this whole whipping fury of what we're up against here as well. It's like trying to decimate that whole thing and just we get a proper good class analysis saying, actually, no, China's not the actual problem here. It's actually our own capitalist class, so it's our own imperialist class. But trying to actually decipher from the outright lies to it, there's some elements of truth as well. I find that challenging, and I guess I'm both yourself and Dust. Yeah, you find that challenging as well.
Are you? What were you asking?
Well,
we found challenging.
I'm asking.
What are you asking that's challenging?
just trying to decipher all that disinformation about China and some of the anti-Chinese sentiment. Yeah.
I got you. I mean, that's a constant, especially in the South, especially in rural areas. A lot of people I talk to, racism, xenophobia, anti-China bigotry is commonplace. And you saw it during the COVID, right when the COVID broke out in March. I think now I actually interviewed my comrade from Taiwan. He was working at a Chinese takeout place, delivering. He had tons of orders right now. But I know when it first started in a lot of rural areas, there was so much anti-Chinese sentiment that a lot of the Chinese restaurants had to just close up their doors for several weeks or months, just because of the reaction they were getting from a lot of people. And I think that's our duty as revolutionaries, to speak out against bigotry, to speak out against xenophobia.
Yeah.
Claro. Yeah. 100%. You know, like it stands to just show, you know, like that's what the bourgeois propaganda does to people. And we really need to stand in defense if we're going to be revolutionary internationalists. You know, I love the masses of China and what they do, and you know, their struggle I see as an extension of the struggle, the Chicano nation and other oppressed people, and we need to take that into account. We can't be so quick to dismiss people without critical thought, and without addressing the fact that they're human beings and they deserve our attention and our investigation. Especially when it comes to talking about their nation, because we should never criticize another nation without understanding and talking with that nation. And the bourgeoisie and how they play into that xenophobic, you know, sentiment amongst the settler colonial classes, you know, it's so disgusting. And it's really sad to hear that. But I've seen the same things here. A lot of Chinese restaurants shut down and everything like that. And especially after Trump was making all those racist ass comments. It's terrible.
Very similar situation here too.
Right. So we're about an hour in on this. We were a little bit late. We're about ready to move into our interview portion of the show. And we don't get a lot of direct comments or a lot of direct questions, but I had a comrade, I believe he's from Texas, had a direct question. I think we could collectively answer this from Tristan. Is there a way for me, the only leftist I know, where I live in a sea of right-wingers in Texas, to dispel some of the propaganda against China? I know you just provided a source, but are there any rhetorical perspectives that may be more, I think it goes in here, okay, that may be more presentable of these types of people? I find that when trying to present sources, etc., to a lot of these people, they completely shut it down and out, etc. So actually, if you follow me on Facebook, I actually have a lot of contacts in China that actually show like kids playing in the park or comedy, just a lot of this little cultural stuff that shows Chinese people as human beings and not these caricatures that they show in the right-wing media is a good way to start. Just Ignacio.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's a good example. I would also say, you know, talking to people, I mean, right-wingers in Texas, you know, like with right-wingers, I don't have too much experience talking with them because them's not my people. But if you want to work with them and you want to try to engage with them, I think what Comrade Dust just said is really important. You need to show them, you know, like these are people over here that are living their life. And I would also start by exposing some of their own exploitation here, you know, like if they're a reactionary, you know, like working class, like white guy, you know, talk about how they're being exploited by, you know, capitalism, you know, talk about how their surplus value goes to feed, you know, the bourgeoisie and their family and all these things. And I feel like that could be more productive, because then you're developing a personal understanding, and then from there you can tie in the understanding of China, to get them to question things. A lot of times, rather than trying to just present an opposing idea, it's better to get them to question their own ideas. And if you can undermine that, then they become more open to discussion about other things. And I would say, in the limited experience I have in discussing things with like right wingers, one of the things I talk about, like gun rights, just start the conversation there. Say, hey, look, you think as a communist, I'm against gun rights, but I'm for it. I'm all for the people having guns. And then that kind of throws them off. And when they're caught off guard, then they start to question things that they've been told, and maybe that they don't have the best understanding about communism in general. And from there, you can really approach a more productive conversation with them about things like China and stuff like that.
All right, on. Well, actually, you just had the experience, and we've actually worked. And I've had similar experience as well, talking with workers who are quite more conservative, want to put it lightly. That have you actually had a few come around, actually just start changing their views of the world and the immediate surrounds as well?
Was that a question?
Yes.
Towards who?
Oh no, it was towards. Middle guy. I've got your name again. Sorry.
Ignacio, yeah?
Sorry. No
worries.
I'll write that down. Sorry about that. I do apologize.
Oh, no, it's all good. It's all good. Could you just repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, good. With your engagement with these type of workers, I'll rephrase it. With these engagement with these type of working class people, did you find actually over time some of them actually are changing their views? Especially for their worldviews and their immediate surrounds. I suppose just to take a little bit further, as the material conditions are changing, so are their ideas as well.
Yeah, definitely. In my limited experience talking with that specific group, I have had them like come to other understandings. In fact, like I had one person who I would almost call a friend. That has gone from being pro-Republican to kind of like talking about, identifying as a socialist. And a lot of that was through a lot of painstaking conversations where, I listened to what they have to say and then just kind of like do what I was just talking about, just enter in certain key points that I know they're going to see and agree with, and then from there just work on it. And now they identify as socialist. They may not say it all the time, but they've said it to me. And that particular individual has come a long way from seeing things. I think it's very difficult to change how they perceive certain things, but to get them to the table to sit down and actually be open to listening, because most of the time they're not even down for that, I think is a very much achievable goal, utilizing, like some sort of commonality, such as like gun rights or what have you, whatever is pertinent to your situation. But that's really difficult. And, a lot of times it turns into wasted energy because these people don't end up even caring in the long run. And it's unfortunate, but, you can't win everyone over. And if we can try, sure, let's do it. But at the end of the day, we can't spend all of our time trying to reach out to these people and invest all that energy into trying to get them to listen when they need to just do it. They need to just, open their minds up and stuff like that.
Right on. That was a great response. You're starting to get into the ideas of emphasis, and that's also very important. But what's changed? What's changed gears for a second? We're starting the interview portion. Let's talk about you, Ignacio. Maybe you can give us a little bit about. I know I did an interview before, had some technical issues. If people want to go back, I interviewed Ignacio before. If people want to look back into that, he probably gave a bigger talk about his background. But maybe you can just give a brief summation of a little bit of your background and a little bit of your politics, how you got into politics.
Okay. So I was born in Troy, Michigan. I grew up there. And I guess growing up, I was very poor, and there was a lot of times we didn't have food. And then my mom, she was adopted, and the family she was adopted by, they were pretty well off. So staying with my dad, because my parents got divorced, staying with my dad, who's from Mexico, Sinaloa, and having that love, that family, the instilling of hard work ethics, and really just embracing family, to seeing like my mom's side of the family, and a lot how different that was, that dynamic at a very young age. Like I started to pick up on it, and I just started to question things. And so from a very young age, I was very inquisitive. And one of my oldest brothers, he actually got into reading Nietzsche, and he couldn't read English. So he had one of my other brothers translate for him. And I got to talking and listening a little bit, and hearing about it. So then I got into philosophy. And getting into philosophy, I started to, read all these different people. And, it was always very interesting. And then I found, like Karl Marx. I started reading Karl Marx and stuff. And I was really digging it. So like from a pretty young age, I'd say around 14, 15, I started to really open my mind up to things. And then I started to try and engage with organizations. I think the first I talked to you a little bit about Dust, the first organization I ever engaged with, I didn't officially join, but was SDS. And after that, I started to just kind of read, study, and do work in communities. But I struggled a lot with addiction, and I had to enter into a process of recovery. And through that was where I really had my major metamorphosis, because I started to think more along the lines of community and break away from that individualist perspective that is so often just forced into us at a young age. And from there, I started to engage with community, work with different organizations. And I really come to find a lot of inspiration from like the Brown Berets in particular. Always been a really big inspiration. The Black Panthers, the Young Lords. And so I kept on moving and kept on doing things, but I never really got behind anything until I was invited to participate with the United Panther movement, which is the mass organization for the New African Black Panther Party. And then so I started to work with them. And from there, I was accepted into the Brown Panther organization. And I met so many amazing people. In particular, Kevin Rashid Johnson has an amazing analysis. I love reading his works, and the comrades in those organizations were just fantastic people. Yeah, there you go, Panther Vision. And it's hard to talk about sometimes. I'm not going to go too much into it. But I did end up resigning from that post. I still have many comrades from that experience, and I learned a lot. And I was able to summarize a lot of experiences. And I still fully support, like the Revolutionary Intercommunal Black Panther Party, which today Kevin Rashid Johnson is the Minister of Defense for. And I think that a lot of people should look into them, check them out, and see what they got to say, because they're an organization led by the New African community, And we can't just write them off. We have to listen to what they have to say, because, you know, there's so much there that we can learn from. And I consider it an honor to have been able to participate with all those comrades, and I always will. And I will always love those comrades who I worked with when I was there. And now I've started to focus a lot more of my energy onto studying Chicano history and our struggle for Aztlan, which has always been something that has been really close and dear to my heart. But, you know, I've just always been engaged with all these other organizations that I feel like I've separated myself a lot from mi own gente. And so I started to really reach out, participate in study groups, read, and just engage, you know, with the circles that are talking about Aztlan. Because for a long time there, I was engaged in doing all these different things, like boots on the ground, all that stuff, that I wasn't paying attention to, you know, like my spirit, to my people, and to the struggles that my family has had to go through, you know, just existing. And I really come to find a lot of joy and spiritual sustenance in that, further diving into, you know, the study of my ancestors and our political line. And I think one of the key transformations for me through all of this is the embracing of Maoism, like you mentioned earlier. I used to be Marxist-Leninist, and then in joining in with the Panthers, I developed an understanding of Maoism, which I continue to study today actively. And, you know, a good source to understand that too would be JMP. I can't pronounce his name, but I think it's like Malfoy Paul or something like that. He's a Canadian professor, I believe. And he's written quite a few books. One book that I read recently was Critique of Maoism, which I dig. Like, it's a good book. It's a good book. And, you know, if you want to have a better understanding of Maoism, I think that's a good place to start. Talk about the development of its synthesis historically through RIM, the Revolutionary Internationalist Movement, and the participating nations that were involved with that. So just studying all that history is really great to understand ideology. But today, for me, I place a lot of emphasis on studying, you know, Chicano liberation and Chicanismo. Because to me, like, that's my heart, you know? That's where I feel happy, and I smile, and, you know, I engage with the camaradas, and we just have a good time. And I think that I'm at a point in my life where I've gone through a lot, and I'm just really thankful to have the people I have in my life with me, the camaradas, the loved ones, and all these inspirations who have helped keep me alive, keep me in a home, and move forward. And I consider it an honor to be here today with all those people in my life.
Wow.
Right on.
Hey,
Yeah.
just a quick note. I just wanted to give a shout out. Ignacio released a video where he had all these books with some cool music, and one of the books was the comrade Joey Villarreal, who I interviewed, and I have a lot of respect for. If people want to understand a little more about Marxist-Leninism, Maoism from a Chicano perspective, I think he's a very good authority on that.
Yeah, definitely. That's an amazing. I've got multiple. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, and then David Fox.
I was just gonna say, like, I got the book, and within the first week, I got another one so I could send to my brother. And I'm probably gonna buy a few more to send to a few more people. Just, it's a great book. I dig it.
I was just going to ask, Dust, can you actually send me the title of the book in the messenger so I can order it?
Okay.
I don't have to do it now, but just, yeah, figure that'd be great. I'm just, as you're talking, I'm writing down all these books you've been referring to, and there's quite a fair few of them, mate. I think one thing you do get involved in all this, you build up an extensive library, and I think I've got a ton of books to still get through yet. I've read a ton of books, and I've got another ton yet. I actually, just going back on the philosophy side of things, that's always been one of my favourites to talk about, and especially talking about dialectical and historical materialism, because when I first started learning it, it was like a big eye-opener. I don't know if there's the experience you had going for that, but it's like all of a sudden you're learning from and you walk outside and you just look at things completely different from what I was traditionally taught. Did you ever go through that yourself? It's like when it's like the curtain or the veil's been lifted up, and it's like, oh wow, I've seen the whole world completely differently now than what I saw. Did you ever had that sort of experience going through that? When you went through that?
Yeah, definitely. I think at first reading Nietzsche, like it opened my mind up to a lot of different things, because he kind of goes into dialectics. And then I think this book, let me see, where is it? This book gave me a really good understanding of dialogue. Oh, there we go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this gave me a really clear understanding. I think one thing I found is like it was really almost natural, like to just think.
Can you stop and read the name of that book? It was a little blurry.
Yeah.
And the author.
Dialectical and Historical Materialism by Joseph Stalin. You can
read
this free online. Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's a great book. And I think after reading that book, it just seemed to make sense. It just clicked. And the way that I had been told to see things just didn't make sense. And I think that's why I had such a chaotic time as a youth trying to rationalize things, because the things people were telling me just didn't make sense. Like it didn't agree with me. And then reading this, it made a lot of sense. I was like, yo, this is so much more clear now. And when I look at things and looking at it through that perspective, it just, it's so much more clear. And you're able to, one crazy thing I find is like someone can pose a question, and with completely different background knowledge, you and another person can arrive at the same conclusion thinking dialectically. It's so crazy. And then in that book for Chicano Power and the Struggle for Aztlán, they talk about Omateo, which was the Nahuatl, perspective and understanding, which very much is dialectical. So then it made sense to me, because, this is how my ancestors thought. This is how my father thinks, and all these different things. And it's the most human way of thinking.
They're right on, and actually interesting, because before I actually had grappled at all, I had a good understanding about dialectical and historical materials, because particularly what was bombarded to me, and like many other people in my life and in Australia here, for example, like the system's always been here. It's always been like this. That I would just accept it. There's been no other way, etc. And when I had a look at it, I can actually now turn around and says, no, it's never always been like this. But basically saying, capitalism has only been with us for the last few hundred years. Prior, we had feudalism, and prior that slavery, and prior that primal communal. We've never really, the life of capitalism itself was basically been the blink, for the entire human history, or even world history, back to ancient times, is to merely a blink of an eye. But it's interesting, we can use it to combat that thought that, oh no, this has always been like that. Humans are naturally greedy, or humans are naturally like this. And then it's been a useful tool to use, or a useful guide to use to combat this type of thought, this total what I call backward thinking. This is no, it's never been like this, ever. It's like saying it was like today is the same as yesterday. Was it like the same as the day as before? And it actually it's actually proof, actual living proof that things are that everything's in a constant state of change. And instead of saying when you hear the old term, well, it's always been like this, we've always done it that way. Well, wrong again. And I find that. Did you ever find that as a useful guide to actually combat those type of ideas?
Yeah, definitely. I remember being young and starting to get into Marxism. People always used to tell me, well, Marxism can never work because of human nature. And I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. Like I couldn't really put into words at that young age. But it just, to my mind, I was just like, man, I'm like 16 years old and my mind's changed so much. I find it hard to believe that, we can't change collectively as a society. So, when we start to, like you said, implement that dialectical perspective, and see things as interconnected as a part of this greater web, the universe and all these things. And, for every cause, there's a reaction, everything like that. We start to see the complexity. And I think the Eurocentric model is very much, duality, very much just yes or no, good or bad. But with the dialectical perspective, we see how there's that unity of opposites and that struggle that develops within them and pushes forward the development. And in relation to human consciousness, that's how it works. When we struggle every day, in Maoist circles, we say, unity, struggle, unity, right? That's dialectical, right? Because say you have a different opinion, I have a different opinion. We come to the table and we begin with, some things that we can unite on. We struggle through some disagreements, and then we come back to unity through that struggle. That's really important. And a lot of times that's not practiced, but we try our best to practice that as much as possible and improve and approach people on their terms. And I think a great example of this, Fred Hampton, he was able to really talk to people and really address people in ways that they could understand these complex theories that before were only accessible through certain, universities and whatnot, but bringing it to the people. In my experience in organizing and engaging with the streets, the people are much smarter than anyone gives them credit for. The masses never cease to amaze me, and their understanding and ability to grasp things is phenomenal. And the amount of things that I've learned just from working with the masses in different contexts is, I would say probably a lot more than I ever read in a book. So it all comes back to, just applying that dialectical perspective to practice and engaging with the masses on that basis.
Well, that's powerful stuff, comrade. I saw a lot of overlaps with your story and my own story, especially Stalin. Like that, Foundations of Leninism. Like before Foundations of Leninism, for me, it was like, the revolution was like a feeling. It was like, I know all my people. I've been poor. I grew up poor. These fucking capitalists got everything. We got to do fucking something about it. But I had no real intellectual understanding of it until I read Foundations of Leninism, which was my eureka movement about imperialism and capitalism. I mean, I read a little bit of Marx, and when I read Marx, my suggestion for introductory to Marx would be like Wage, Labor, and Capital, which you can kind of see if you worked in any factory setting. But I don't know if it's like the way Stalin writes is very down to earth, pragmatic. It's very easy for working class people to get. And coming from my background, grew at one point there was eight of us down a mile-long dirt road in a 2-bedroom trailer, and then part of my teenage years, I grew up in a Mexican trailer park around undocumented immigrants. And when I got into activist communities, in college and stuff, I was like, and these people, the way they talked and just the way they seemed to be exclusionary. And then it wasn't in the college Marxist scene, especially the Trotskyites. There was a lot of classism and stuff. And it's actually through civil rights leaders and African-American community and older communists involved in the labor movement that I found comrades with and were able to learn communism. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, like your struggle is coming from a working class, oppressed nation perspective, and then having to deal with, what passes for the left.
Yeah, I mean, it's been difficult. The first time I read Capital, I was in county jail. And to be real with you, I did not understand 90% of it. But I've gone back over the years to go back over it. And I feel like entering a lot of different circles. I won't name names, but a lot of different circles I've really been talked down to. Because I don't always have the best vocabulary, or I don't read the same things or have the same understanding. And it's always created this really like disgusting feeling inside that maybe something's wrong with me, and it was really hard to combat that. And I've had to struggle to build up confidence over time to be able to talk and articulate my own perspective. And that's been through engaging with other people in similar backgrounds, like other Chicanos, La Raza, and the new African communities. Just engaging in these, spaces has really helped me to feel a lot more confident in talking to people who really tried to gatekeep this knowledge and tried to promote this Eurocentric perspective, which is really linear. And it's been difficult. It's a struggle, and I still struggle with it. But I think because I've had so many positive influences throughout my work in doing, like activism and participating with organizations, I've been able to take all these things as lessons and summarize them in a productive way, so that I could better improve myself, and also not have to betray who I am, and not have to, ever say, oh man, like I wish I could have gone to a university or something like that, because it's good, if you can go to a university, do it. But definitely don't shame people for not being able to do that either, I started working when I was like 13, 14 at a car wash, and I remember even back then, like I had books and I would try to read the books, in between, like, drying cars and stuff. And I've been working my whole life, just like my dad, just like my brothers. And it's hard. Thankfully, as a result of my recovery process, I was able to go to a trade school and get my diploma, because I couldn't graduate high school because I went to jail. But I got my diploma and I got a certificate to work as a medical assistant. And because of that, I was able to enter the medical field and start working there, which has been a huge influence. And in large part, I started doing that because my influence from Che Guevara, and the work he's done, and trying to find a trade that is useful in a revolutionary setting. I've worked construction over the years. I've worked in retail, service industry, and everything. But I try to always find, no matter what it is that I've been doing, how I can utilize this for my community, for Chicanos, how I can utilize this for the revolution. And in the medical field, I went to paramedic school. I didn't complete it, but I went there and I learned a lot of the basic first aid trauma treatments, not because like necessarily I wanted to go work as a paramedic, which I kind of did, I kind of didn't. I just didn't want to work for the fire department. But I went there and I did it because I knew that knowledge was valuable, especially for the revolution. So that's how I look at things when it comes to learning. And I guess not everyone shares the same, mentality, but I've tried my best to work with people, even though we disagree on things, and even though sometimes they talk down to me, because I want to learn from everyone's perspective. That's just part of who I am. Like it doesn't matter who you are. I want to listen to what you have to say. And as difficult as it may be sometimes, I think that we all need to, at some point, listen to others and see why they think the way they do, so that we can either realize maybe I'm wrong or maybe they're wrong. And how can I help them see a better perspective? How can I improve my own perspective? And engaging with them, come to find unity if possible, because it's not always possible. Like, I'm not going to go into the whole liberal, everyone has the right to their opinion, because they don't. Fascists don't have a right to their opinion. I don't give a fuck what they got to say. You miss me with that shit, 100%. So yeah, but when there's people that, are meaningfully trying to engage, I think it's always productive to put some degree of effort in there. And sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I'm not, but you don't know until you try it with some people. And, that's what I try to do my best with.
Before David Fox, before you go on with the next question, I just want to give a quick shout out to Matt Cedillo and Dr. Jose Prado, who have been doing over 10 months now a very approachable study on capital from the Chicano perspective, which I partly archived on my channel. I need to update that further, but that's still an ongoing thing. I just want to put that out there. David Fox, you can go ahead and go on with the next question.
Yeah. Look, actually, there was a lot of stuff you said there actually I could relate to. I found that as well. My own experiences, I'm from a trade background as a boilermaker, but like for those, I never went to university, and sometimes when I dealt with those from university, they sort of talked down to me like I was lesser of them as well. And basically, I was, because I didn't have some sort of degree in that. And I had that, so it's very similar experience as well. And probably through a couple of my videos I did, I did have a little dash back at them at those type of people, but I also too learn that's part of a product of class society, and there's a lot of good academics there as well. But the other thing as well, actually going back to capital, and it's just been talked about or touched on, what I found interesting, and that's certainly a challenge trying to read through the first volume. But what helped me assist us those that actually have read it and studied it, like Comrades Harper Bra in the UK there with the CPGBMLs, and he actually talked about what Karl Marx actually studied, what was a commodity. And I thought this was interesting at just how easily that was put forward, or what was a commodity, because we tend to use the language commodities. Or people think, oh yeah, that's something, but actually, what turns something into a commodity and broke it down? Did you ever find that people assist you that way to that simple understanding? What actually through that, like obviously reading Marx's Capital, I've got volume 3 here at the moment. Because I'm reading about fictitious capital, and there's a lot of reading through that. But what I've actually gone and done, and it's actually gone and talked to other comrades to get a much easier interpretation. Even though Engels finished this off, and Engels got to make things simple as possible. Did you always find that you had to get the assistance of other comrades as sometimes decisive for all this? And like I've explained, like understand what a commodity was. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I definitely, the understanding that I have today would not be possible without the comrades that I've had who took the time to explain things to me. Because I struggle a lot with ADHD, and like my attention just like isn't always there. So sitting down to read something like Capital is really difficult. So a lot of times I have to bounce back and forth. Like I'll watch YouTube videos and stuff like that. But the decisive factor has always been comrades who are able to read through Capital and different things like that. And Matt Cedillo is a great example, because I love watching his videos as well, and talk about those things. That helps me understand the most, because sometimes reading it, as Karl Marx wrote it, isn't always the easiest way. And having someone explain it to me in terms that I would understand really solidifies that understanding. And I've had a lot of camaradas, like Candy Corrales, who has development.
Yep. Well, he's dropped out.
Yeah, he dropped out. Oh, that sucks. That was a good conversation.
Well, that's been good.
Oh man, Ignacio. Maybe if I yell hard enough, he'll hear me down there in Florida.
Due to a slight technical difficulty.
Oh, there you go. There you go. He looks like he's back. He's back with us.
Yeah.
There you are. I'm gonna put him back in his center.
Oh, okay.
And I'm gonna show your name. Boom, boom, boom. All right. Were you in the middle of something before you went out?
Yeah. What was the last thing you heard?
David, what was the last thing he was saying?
Good question.
You don't remember? I made a joke and then we forgot.
I think the last thing I was saying was like my one camarada, Candy Corrales, has been instrumental in my ideological development and helping to understand things more concretely, which is another thing for me too. Like in developing and understanding, I try not to always surround myself with other, like men, but to get the women's perspective, non-binary perspective, because a lot of times I'll find myself so focused and like dependent on my own perspective that I end up making a lot of critical errors. So if we don't have other perspectives that challenge our own, then we can't really progress ideologically.
Yeah, that's right.
And,
I think actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I mean, sorry, you go, Dust. Sorry,
sorry, man. No, look, Dulce, Comrade Dulce is actually with us, and big shout out to her. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we're on the interview portion. Man, I just want to give a shout out. Like how I met you was awesome. I think it was right when when Trump straight up murdered the beloved general. I can't say his name or Facebook will try to shut me down again. But Trump basically murdered the beloved general of Iran. And people were coming out, young people were coming out, and I get this call. I think somehow I got in contact with you through that and around that, and you were getting me in touch on these national anti-war calls, which was awesome. I think at one point we tried to start a leftist biker group on Facebook. I named it the John Brown's Raiders. I drive a big muscle bike. I don't know. This isn't. I don't know. It seems like there's a disconnect between like working class. I think this is working class revolt, and David Fox went into his. He's a union guy. He worked as a boiler maker. I'm a truck driver, and we'd love to have working class voices on here. I really do think there's a disconnect. Between the larger left in the United States and in Europe. And I think this is a very important disconnect because the slogan, get out of the movement to the masses, or the Maoist statement, from the masses to the masses. It is the working class and the oppressed nations that is going to lead the revolution. Maybe we can talk about that role. How do we, as workers, how is the oppressed workers or people from oppressed nations, how do we get the message out there and spread this? How do we become effective revolutionaries? What have you learned through your struggles?
I think one of the key things that I've learned is where to place emphasis. For me, today, I place emphasis on the oppressed nationalities, the First Nations, the Chicano Nation, the New African Nation. And also, I do a lot of work and try to focus a lot of emphasis on lumpen organizations because I feel like so often these disenfranchised workers are, locked away into the penal system of the U.S. fucking empire, America with 3 Ks, and everyone neglects them. No one wants to pay attention. They say, yeah, it's kind of messed up if they're in that position, but it's not like that, because a lot of us got family in there. A lot of us know people in there, and it's not, they're human beings and they're camaradas, and sometimes they're the most down camaradas, and we have to listen to them. We have to empower them. We have to help educate them. And too much sometimes the working class is afraid to work with the lumpen proletariat or lumpen organizations because of the stigma placed on them by the bourgeoisie. And to me, that's not coincidental. They don't want us to unite with the lumpen because they don't want us to recognize our own potential. They don't want us to begin to see that united we can be stronger. And a lot of times we sink into just like uncritical debates and, like reform. But when we start to engage with the oppressed communities, the lumpen, we start to return to that revolutionary perspective, to that understanding that as a working class of different oppressed nationalities, and as a labor movement, we have to center our focus and emphasis where the principal contradiction is, and use that to move forward. And that can only be done by engaging with the masses, and engaging with the oppressed masses, and taking that and trying to get the other, sections of the working class to engage with them as well, and to see each other as a community. As a source of knowledge, as a source of comfort, take care of one another. A lot of people talk about the survival programs pending revolution of the Black Panthers. And one thing I want to point out whenever we discuss this is that those survival programs, the Panthers started and then they handed over to the community, right? The revolutionaries initiated these programs like the free health clinics, or like the food drives for students in inner cities who didn't have money for school lunches and stuff like that. They started them, they organized them, and then they went to the community, taught them how to do it, and let the community take over. And that's such a crucial point that is just overlooked all the time. We need to do things and invite the participation of the masses. Let's not just give them something, right? We're not trying to be like an NGO or a charity. We're trying to get them to participate and see that they have power, that they have a voice, that they belong to a struggle that has a long history of resistance against imperialism, settler colonialism, anti-racism, all these different things. And we need to uplift them into the point where they feel comfortable participating. And like we were talking about earlier, a lot of times leftist spaces can be intimidating. People gatekeep knowledge. People talk down to people. And we can't be doing none of that. We can't be acting like that because that's not revolutionary. How are we going to talk to the most oppressed people if you can't relate with them, if you can't understand them, or if you can't listen to them? That's such a key issue. Listening, like just listening to people. I can't tell you how many times I've gone out to do a serve the people program, and I ended up just sitting there until it got dark, listening to people talk. And it's not always about, like one thing or another. It's just whatever's on their mind. Because outside of all these different things too, one thing that is often overlooked is mental health. And sometimes, we know the answer to the problems we have, but talking about them with someone can make a huge difference. There's so many times I've had camaradas up until like 4 a.m. talking about something that's been bothering me, or vice versa. And at the end of it, I feel so much better. I go to sleep and I feel good. So when it comes to like organizing and getting people to see what power they have, it really stems from being able to listen, being able to place emphasis where it's needed, when it's needed, and being able to put in the work, because it's hard work and it takes an emotional and physical toll on you. It really does. And that's something that we all have to find our level of comfort with and move forward from there. For me, it's just, it seems like limitless, because I've shared a lot of the same struggles, and sometimes I can't go to sleep because I know certain people in certain situations, and it keeps me up. And I know a lot of camaradas who feel the same. So we need that revolutionary love. And one of my favorite quotes has always been Che Guevara, where he said, it's hard to imagine, I'm probably paraphrasing a little bit, it's been a while, but it's hard to imagine a revolutionary without a deep sense of love. And that always stood out to me because, to me, you could never do this work without having love, without being invested in it, without feeling pride in where you come from and in the struggle that has come before us, and us being able to participate in that. It's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's also something that we need to take seriously. So with those things in mind, moving forward, we just always got to keep persisting in the fact that we're here because we have love for one another, because we believe we can do better, and because we are not going to settle for anything less than freedom and a future at all costs.
Wow. That's Dan, that's right on that one. And actually, it's actually really interesting about talking to each other about mental health issues, because even from my experience being a union organizer, and the average day for a lot of hard-working organisers out there is they're dealing with complaint, you're dealing with complaint, one win, complaint, and it actually builds up over time. And if you don't start talking, and I actually always believe you should be talking to each other and supporting each other one way or the other, and that's vitally important. I think actually, would you actually say that's a vital part of actually building our infrastructure? It's how we actually support each other through this, because when we're fighting capitalism, be it for a trade union struggle, through an Indigenous struggle, for other type of struggle, it will take its toll. So do you find it actually this is actually a vital part of building the infrastructure?
Without a doubt, yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, the relationships I have with people today were developed through those conversations. And, the strongest connection you will build with people is when you can talk not just about revolutionary things, but about everyday things that are bothering them, and listen to their problems. And it's not always about listening and then telling them what to do, so much as it is about listening. And in some cases, asking questions, like to have them arrive at those conclusions. I've had comrades a lot of times, just do that to me. And we arrive at the same conclusion on what I should do in a certain situation. And that's so important. And when we're talking about building that infrastructure, being able to talk with the people we want to organize and listen to them, hang out with them, chill, that's important, because a lot of the people I work with, you won't get them to do shit. You won't get them to do anything or to hear you out and listen to what you have to say unless you earn their respect, unless you can listen and actually engage with them at their level, which sometimes is above you, like sometimes they're up here and we're coming in there and we're thinking, like, I got to help, teach this comrade something. And you end up leaving like, damn, I learned a lot, and that's that dialectical relationship, right? Because when we're talking about teaching people, as a teacher, you're learning from your student. Your student is teaching you. One of the most beautiful things I had the privilege of doing when I was working with some organizations is leading PE sessions. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I don't have all the answers. I'm learning every day. I'm trying to build a better understanding, and I don't pretend to know everything. I will make mistakes, and I will do my best to always, correct those mistakes. But in being able to lead PE sessions, one thing I found so beautiful was how I would explain one thing to one comrade and they get it, and then I explain it the same way to another comrade, they don't get it. So now I'm challenged. I got to explain it in a different way. I gotta try to think of a different way that might better suit this one comrade. So in doing that, I'm learning how to explain it in a way that they're going to understand. And at the same time, I'm challenging my mind to develop my own understanding of that thing. And from there, I can then move forward and say that I understand something way better just through trying to teach it to some different comrades. And that's building that infrastructure, it's engaging with them on their terms, and being able to build that understanding in different ways with one another towards, a productive outcome.
Right on, man.
Very good.
We're coming up on 2 hours. We should probably move into our last final section. Maybe I'll just sum up a little bit. I think the conclusion is that we need to build communities of resistance, communities of solidarity, which networks, and we need to break outside this damn Stockholm syndrome where we're continually to back this empire that has nothing to do with us, as workers, as people of oppressed nations, and build our own power and give power to the people. I think that's the way I always sum up my shows. But let's move into the workshop portion, and this is real nuts and bolts. I believe it's my turn to give the questions today. I'm going to put out a few unprincipled positions, maybe from a right-wing perspective, maybe from a liberal perspective, and then, not to put our guest on the spot, I'm going to have David Fox initially respond to that, and then Ignacio, and then I'll come back in summation. The first one is more from a right-wing, kind of xenophobic perspective. Let me try to play act for a second. David Fox, why are you always talking about Iran and China? We got struggles right here. The bosses are trying to fuck us. Why should we give a shit about those people?
Well, I understand the sentiment, and obviously, we're up against our very daily struggles and that. But the thing is, the reason why we should actually care about China and Iran, Russia, etc., it's because our struggle is not just isolated by itself. I mean, the same forces that are up against us, fighting us, are at the same time up against those living in China, in Russia, and Iran as well. They're trying to actually do those countries as well. And if we think we're just going to fight by ourselves in our own isolation, then we're going to lose in a very big, spectacular fashion, and we're going to be the ones that are going to be left out. Sorry, we're going to be the ones who are going to be suffering from all this. Be it from job losses, be it through a cut in wages conditions, or any type of attack on our own civil liberties. But we have to actually defend that and realise now it's not just one government that's doing it. This is the system that we live under. It's an imperialist system itself. And if we do not learn how to actually team up and unite with others around the world, well, then obviously we're still going to be stuck in this quagmire.
Comrade Ignacio?
I always find it interesting when people make distinctions between us and them as if we're not all human beings. And I think that the real question lies in being able to recognize a little bit of you in them. And the reason why I'm always talking about them is because a lot of the things that we can enjoy here are a result of what's being done to them. And if we can move past this distinction between us and them and see them as our sister, as our brother, then we can begin the conversation of what's being done to them in our names, and whether or not we want to put our names behind that. because I'll tell you what, I don't want my name behind that. I'm not down for it. And if this state is going to go around screwing up their lives and say it's in my name, I got something to say about it. And I think you should too, because I don't want nobody talking about me. I don't want nobody talking about you or anyone else here saying that we're down for the terrible things going on over there to them because of this state. The issue is that distinction is making you blind to the fact that there is injustice, inequality, and we have an opportunity to do something about it. So the real question is whether or not you're going to do something about it, and you're going to recognize them as your sister or your brother and have the heart as well as courage to do something to help them, and as a result, help yourself.
Right on. I said that from a kind of a right wing perspective, but there's a lot of overlap between the right wing and the bourgeois left wing. And if you look at the actions of AOC, Bernie Sanders, AOC went along with regime change in Venezuela. Bernie Sanders called Maduro a tyrant. He called Chavez a dictator. I mean, it's the same perspective. It's this great national chauvinism that the U.S. is the best, it will always be the best, and those people, though, they're trying to get to this model, and the U.S. is a beacon of all this fucking bullshit. But the answer to that, both the right wing and the left wing, the so-called left wing, the fucking sheepdogs, the answer is international solidarity. And that is an injury to one is an injury to all. And if you understand that on an international level, you will be an anti-imperialist. You will take when they rain bombs down on the people of the Middle East, or they put sanctions on the people in Latin America, and they kill those people, they're killing us as fellow human beings and as fellow workers, and also from people of oppressed nations. Those are similar oppressed nations. So, okay, we'll get into the next one. This will be the last one, and I'll go with David Fox.
Playing right now.
Okay, David Fox, why are you so involved in activism and unionism? If you would have put that energy and those resources into education or getting further in your career, you would be a lot richer than you are today. Why are you even messing around with that?
Well, the reason why actually I am involved in all this, because my interests are entwined up with everybody else's interests, and that is my fellow workers. That's why I am a member of a union. I've been a member since I was an apprentice, and I was in my apprenticeship, and obviously my activism has been primarily around that for quite a long time. And I felt, well, look, I've heard this argument before about putting all our efforts to advance myself. It could have been a possibility, but I think it would have been a very slim possibility as well, because all those opportunities that we talked about is no longer there. It's quite diminished these days. And it's not just for myself, but for everybody else. And that's why it's important that I do concentrate a lot of my time and effort into a struggle to make it, well, basically, if we're all in this to make it a better world for everybody, that everyone's got the opportunity to advance, not just very few people, because under the system we live under, only few people do advance. It's not everybody does. Not everyone gets the exact same equal higher up position. It doesn't happen that way at all. And unfortunately, it's becoming concentrated in fewer and fewer hands while everyone else has to suffer. And while the system we live under also suffers, and this is another thing why I'm also too, the system we live under is only very few people. Once again, there's only one layer of people that seems to advance, but everyone else is left behind. Everyone should be in this advancing together. So that's why I do it. It's if you want to put it in another way, or I want to put it in another way, and put it quite bluntly, it's because I do this because I also give a shit as well. And I think it's that's why we're all in this doing this to fight for a better world. I think everyone should have an opportunity to move forward, not just some people.
Comrade Ignacio.
So for me, it's because one, I think you have the end goal all messed up. You know, getting rich, money is just exploited labor, right? And it's not just exploited off the people here, but the people in Africa, South America, from my raza, right? I'm not trying to build an empire off of the backs of the people that I say I love. So when you say, why do I get involved with all this stuff? Well, because I got love for my community and where I come from, and I'm proud of it. And if for you betraying that means something, well, that says more about you as a person than it does about me investing all my time and energy into doing this that doesn't personally profit for me. But, you know, what I do gain is much more valuable than money. And that's a community of people who actually care for each other and the ability to engage with people who share the similar struggles that I do and people who have different struggles. Because life at the end of the day isn't going to be measured by how much money you got, but by the people you have there with you. And I find it hard pressed to find any person who spent their life in pursuit of getting rich happy at the end of it all when they're sitting there alone or surrounded by people who just want a piece of what they got. So that to me just seems kind of messed up. So my question to you would just be the antithesis. Why do you think getting rich is the way to go?
Yeah.
Nice.
Actually, it's just interesting.
Go ahead.
I don't believe in organised. I don't believe in organised religion. That's I won't get into what it was, but one of the 10 Commandments says that love thy neighbour, and I'll tell you what, money cannot buy you love.
that was a great response. I think there is an element of like spirituality, of courage, of revolutionary fervor, revolutionary spirit, whatever you want to call it. Whether that Che quote, at the risk of seeming ridiculous, a revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love. I think ultimately it is the material conditions that is going to push people towards revolution. But there is base and there is superstructure. And the superstructure is that love and that drive, that revolutionary fervor to want to do something for your community and for the world. And as people see less and less opportunities, as people are less likely to get ahead, they're more likely to want to give a portion of their energy to building these necessary revolutionary communities. And I always liked capitalism as a pyramid scheme. Like, so you say we shouldn't raise the minimum wage, but those jobs are necessary. Do you think all those people should have to live in poverty just so the system of capitalism continue? And the right answer, a better world is possible. Capitalism is weak. Capitalism is ineffective. The reason why capitalism is going to fall is because its own internal contradictions. Socialism is a stronger system. Socialism is a system that more people take responsibility and take ownership of the system. And they're more likely to invest in support and defend that system. And it will win eventually, but it's going to take courage and strength and persistence. Stuff I see from our young comrade here, Ignacio, showing and being out in the street, boots on the ground, revolutionary education, being a part of. So I think that will end our workshop. Ignacio, is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap this up?
Well, I'd just like to say, again, thank you for having me here. It's been really great talking with both of you. If anyone has a chance, definitely check out, a lot of the revolutionary content coming from you. Also, Tele Aguar, which is another source. I saw that the camarada before me was from there, and I really love the content that's coming from there. And if you want to understand a little bit more about the Chicano perspective, definitely check that out. And just remember to always listen and have love and stand up for what you know to be true, and recognize that even though some people may claim to be revolutionary, they have a vested interest in preserving this system. And we got to be able to differentiate between those genuine people and non-genuine people so that we can get back to the core of the matter, which is building, like you said, comrade, a future for us all, and better understanding the perspectives of all the oppressed nations and the working class.
Right on, maybe Comrade Fox, maybe I'll let you get a last word and we'll go ahead and do our chant.
Yeah, well, Nancy, it's actually it was a pleasure having you on board as well with us today. I do apologise about the technical difficulties we had before the start and trying to reboot the computer. It's all fun and games, but I learned a lot from you, personal scale, and it's great to learn. It's talk about it. The best way I sometimes find out through things without the best solutions I find through about all this stuff throughout my struggles through listening and learning, and I really appreciated what you said today, and hopefully for all those others who are watching out there, and even for the fellow workers out there, it's actually good to learn all this and absorb it, and also too feel free to ask any questions, but you're most welcome back any time. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, to end the show, we do a chant. I guess I'll lead it. Just repeat after me, your best of your ability. Dare to struggle.
Dare to struggle.
Dare to struggle.
Dare to win.
Dare to win.
All power to the people.
All power to the people.
Right on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.